Well, as we edge closer to the local government elections, let's focus on independents and their prospects. Do they actually stand a chance? Or is it the game only between the top parties? And what exactly are the economic development plans of the top three parties outside of the metros? Let's unpack this with political analyst Mapaseka Muroa. Thanks for your time, Mapaseka, and welcome to the eNCA family when it comes to analysts ahead of this election. We'll be speaking to you much more. So let's talk about independents, because we've obviously seen a spike. What are their prospects? I think you're muted. Just unmute yourself.
Apologies for that.
There you go.
Thank you so much for having me, and welcome to Prime Time. It's lovely to see you on here.
Thanks.
Look, it's interesting to see independents come into the fray. I think this speaks to how, a lot of South Africans are actually sick of, the normal politics, particularly party politics, as it exists. So that's why we're seeing a lot of independents now coming to the fray. I think there are, multiple things to look at. The first thing would be that there hasn't been a significant growth in terms of the number of votes that independents have gotten in the past. If we look at 2011, they got about 0.89% of the total votes, and in 2016, they got about 1.14%. So that's a growth of about 0.27%, right? As compared to the Democratic Alliance, which got about 4 percentage points from 2011 to 2016. And we know that the economic freedom fighters entered only in 2016 with about 8%. So in terms of growth, there hasn't been that much. Another thing to consider would be the fact that it's currently saturated right now. You had about 800 candidates who are independents in 2016 that is, and now we've got around 1,600 that are currently contesting. So it's saturated, and there are a lot of options, but what they can take advantage of is the proportional representation system, because we know that people in local government vote in two ways. You've got the first past the post, and then you've got the PR system. So if you are like the One South Africa movement that's saying, yes, you've got independents that are contesting, but also as an organization, we'll be contesting that 50% within the PR. So they might be able to take advantage of that. Another thing to consider is the fact that they don't have as much coin as the other political parties do. We don't see a lot of posters that, are telling us about these independents, whereas you're seeing red, you're seeing yellow, you're seeing blue everywhere you go. So as much as they might be known in their communities, it is kind of difficult to communicate the message thoroughly, because they don't have the same infrastructure as the political parties do.
Yeah, so they definitely will probably make some dents, right? Very small. I should actually call them dings, when you ding your car. But is that going to have an impact on the top three parties at all? Are they largely still going to stay in control?
Look, I would argue that slightly, right? Particularly when we look at the One South Africa movement, they might be able to snatch some votes from the Democratic Alliance. Action SA will be another one that will snatch some votes from the Democratic Alliance. But another one is just the the African National Congress, and the fact that, we've seen how unhappy the citizens are. So they might be able to snatch just a little ding in that instance as well. But we also need to look at the overall picture, as I've said before, is that they've only had a 0.27 increase between 2011 and 2016. We are seeing a more, a prevalent presence of them, particularly on social media, but it's not that much. It's not that huge. So they will be able to make a ding, but not a dent.
Yeah. So let's talk about accountability of independence, because normally you'd have a political party to hold a candidate or a councillor rather accountable. But here, who's going to hold an individual accountable but him or herself?
Well, the interesting thing is that they're saying the people hold them accountable, right? Which is the interesting thing. But look, with the ones that are particularly part of movements, right? The civic organizations, as well as you think the New Horizon movement, the One South Africa movement, the citizens movement in Ekurhuleni, is that particular movement will then hold them accountable. They will be the ones who whip them into shape if necessary.
Yeah, and just in terms of, you say they don't have coin, etc., to get their messages out. But when it comes to local government elections, we know that it's all about the campaigning, going door to door. And now we have things like social media, even WhatsApp messages that you can send out to communities. The advantage they might have is that, they're your neighbor. They live in the community, so people know who they are, especially if they are considered to be community leaders. Will that make any difference for them in terms of people actually saying, actually, this time around, I'm going to go with somebody I know, somebody who lives in the area, who understands the issues that we have in this community?
Look, they absolutely should do that. But now the key is, another thing is, in terms of your community, especially with COVID-19, what exactly is the interaction of individuals? Look, I'll speak for myself and say, in my community particularly, all I see is posters around me. I am not one to particularly go outside all the time, particularly because of COVID. So there isn't that opportunity as maybe there previously was to maybe interact with the individual. But they can, because these people have a track record within the community. They might be pastors, like Reverend, the current Reverend who's running in city of Ekurhuleni, Reverend Matebula. It might be, a business person in the community who's well known and has been well known. So they can take advantage of that. But interaction is not as much as it used to be, particularly because of COVID.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for your insights. I look forward to talking to you next week as we build up, of course, to that election on the 1st of November.